Welcome back to another episode of the Overnight Success Podcast. I'm here today with Matt McCurdy, a friend. We've met, I guess, in the last 12 months. I think that's about when we met in Front Row Dads. And I'll jump into the intro here and we'll kind of jump in. So, Matt McCurdy is a husband of 12 years, a proud father of a thoughtful 7-year-old, and a real estate investor and broker. He's known for his focus on continuous improvement and building sustainable success, both in business and in life. So, welcome, Matt. It's great to have you here, and I'm excited for our conversation today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, John.
Yeah. I forgot the one thing to add on here too is like you are also a new author of Corn Fed Millionaire, which we'll definitely get into. I think I heard you drop that title a few times while we were out in Austin in December, but we'll get into that here. But would love kind of like the 3 to 5 minute summary of kind of where you were. I know before we clicked record, corporate America to kind of where you are now, what your real estate success looks like and kind of what your lifestyle looks like. And then we'll kind of figure out like all the in-betweens and see how you got here.
Sure. Yeah. So I started with corporate America working in the supplier management field. I graduated from college at the University of Iowa and immediately started in a corporate job where we managed suppliers. So this young 20-something-year-old kid was going around to different aviation suppliers and telling them how to operate their business. So imagine a 20-something-year-old out of college and how well that went, right? So I had a lot of growth from those formative years and learned a lot. Continued to use that morphing into my next role with another company, Whirlpool, I think I can tell them. But basically, sourcing, supplier management role. Again, easy transition from that to real estate, because within real estate, you're managing so many different contractors, you're managing deadlines, you're managing budgets. It was a very easy transition. So while I was in my second job, I kept bashing my head against the wall of how do I go to bed at night with ease, knowing that my K, my investments in stocks are able to continue to perform and not just have the rug swept out from under me through corporate greed, through a CEO making the wrong decision fraudulently or unknowingly. And I just didn't feel right. So I kind of took control, and, I would say looking internally, that's a characteristic I have, is just having some kind of control. But within that really helped free my mind, because from there on, I started investing in real estate in 2013, wrote a business plan in 2012. And within those 3 years of just going gangbusters, and something I kind of coined to myself and my wife to get through those 3 years, because we were working nonstop. Every time we came home from work, we'd go work on the rental properties or vice versa, right? So it was just continual turn, not a lot of time spent with friends and family, but it worked out in the end. Maybe not the best way to do it, but it's the way I did it. So it's something I call short-term sacrifice equals long-term gain. And from there, I set it up to where within those 3 years, by December of 2016, I was out of corporate America and turned the next page to becoming a corn-fed millionaire. So from there, I continued to invest in property, but at that point, I was financially free and didn't have the shackles of needing to do anything besides work on my rental properties. And from there, I've just continued to build a life that I truly desire, that incorporates some, but I'm trying to alleviate some of that as well, have more intentionality around what I'm doing and the work that I'm doing, and make sure it's truly value added strategic work and not painting walls kind of work.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I guess one of my questions is, was that a hard sell to your wife, right? Like you saw that corporate, there's some security there, but you realize that the security can also be like a false sense of security. So you didn't quit your job. I guess that would have been the hard thing, because like, hey, I'm quitting today. We're going to go build this real estate empire. But was that a hard sell to kind of get rid of the social life and like be heads down for 3 years, day in and day out with your wife? Or did she see the vision alongside you?
Yeah, so that's a great question because it's a question I get quite often from other investors, especially new ones starting out. And I always tell them if they don't have their significant other lock and step on board with what they're doing, they're bound to fail. And I was fortunate enough, my wife is the one that brought Rich Dad Poor Dad. She always likes to like stick that knife in every once in a while when I get too big of a head, right?
Yeah.
Bring this guy down to earth. I'm the one that brought this book to you. So I get to hear that, and I give her full credit. She's the one that brought that book to me, and then I read it and I was like, wait a minute, this is a great idea I came up with. She's like, get out of here. But it's one of those things that she was very supportive, and she continues to be to this day. The first few rental properties, I I took her along and we went through, once we had them under contract, to walk through and get her ideas and input on what I was doing. But after a few, she pretty much said, just leave me at home. I trust you. And she used the word trust quite often. And that's something that you build towards, right, in your relationship. And I think it did wonders. Number one, we had success in the beginning. So that helped build that trust. But number two is something I always, and I reiterated a lot in my book, really working towards a business plan. And whatever you're doing, if it is something that the IRS calls a business, you should have a business plan, because that is something that helps you really have a baseline and a backstop for when things get tough or you get emotional or you're like, what can I do? Wow, you have a business plan when you were in a good space to write it. And before you got in the day to day and overwhelmed and busy, you have this strategic direction and just execute towards it. And then from there, obviously, it's a living, breathing document, but you have time to really at least start calling yourself out. Like, what was I thinking back, 2 or 3 years ago? What was I thinking there? That's right. Things have changed. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z now.
Yeah, I always think that when you create business plans, especially, but even when you just kind of create visions or goals, you create that based off of the information you have at that point, right? And for you, I apologize if this is off base, but I feel like the only knowledge you had was essentially what you read in Rich Dad Poor Dad, more or less. And I'm sure you did a lot more research from there. But that business plan was built off of more of like theoretical or reading versus I can imagine how much you learned over those first 3 years by doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I read quite a few more books. That was the initial one that kind of stroked the match to light the fire. There's another one that I'll give Robert Kiyosaki full credit for. That one really helped me. Uh, Rich Dad Poor Dad's good at morphing your mindset. The Real Book on Real Estate, I think is what it's called. And it's a thick book, probably 300 and some pages, was the playbook. It really is. And that's what I would tell any real estate investor learning or just starting out, or maybe you have a few and you want to scale it up. That book really kind of sets the foundation. And from there, you can kind of apply new principles as you learn them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it sounds like both you and your wife, I mean, to be able to do that for 3 years straight, you're all in, right? Because I have definitely got excited about things and then, a couple months later lose interest and things like that. Obviously, progress helps with that. And it sounds like you kind of had progress pretty early on. But I'm curious how you were able to build like that much conviction in something that, again, I mean, you're reading a lot of books that kind of support that, but until you see it happen to yourself, right? Like I know plenty of, if you read about the Burr method, right? Like, oh yeah, just go buy a house with somebody else's money, you flip it, and then all of a sudden you're making hundreds of dollars a month. Like it sounds great, but that's, there's only like 5 of those in your city that you could even think about. But for you, I mean, you sat down and you pushed through it. So kind of curious what that journey looked like, if there's any time that there was doubt, or just like, how do you get that conviction with something that is, not entirely a sure thing?
Yeah, and that's another great question. It was early on, I guess the conviction was doing the first one. It took me a year and a half from the time I published my business plan to myself to the actual first closing of the first house I bought.
Mm.
So that should tell you something, right? But I did have a concerted, conservative approach, and I didn't sway from it because I didn't want to screw up that first one. And after that first one, bought it December 13th, let's say. I think that's the date. And then we renovated it within a couple weeks, had it rented out by January 1. And within that, I was making roughly, after principal, interest, taxes, property insurance, I think I was making right around $500 a month. That's immediately all I needed, right? That was the hook that said, okay, now I just have to do that over and over and over again. And that's really kind of what drove it for us. And from there, I was extremely motivated because at probably year 1 to year 2, I started a calendar of, I'm leaving corporate America. I thought I was leaving in April of 2017, but corporate America turned that up a little bit sooner for me, which was another story for another time. But it was actually positive. And I would say about month 20 out, I knew, hey, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to get out of here. So that was my other additional motivation. So yes, there was some sacrifice, but the way I looked at it, 3 years, what's 3 years if we're claiming what adult males live until they're 75, 80 years old? Like this is something that I needed to do for myself and my family that made so much sense that it was a small price to pay in my mind.
Yeah. I watched a video yesterday. It was talking about a fitness journey. And this guy lost so much body fat over like almost a year, basically. And he would, the fitness trainer was kind of saying, like, for some people that might seem like a really long time, but you're going to be here anyway. And this is kind of
Hmm.
the way I hear what you're saying, of essentially like, I'm going to be here 3 years from now. 3 years from now, do I want to look back and say, I wish I would have done that? Or am I going to put some sacrifice now and say, I'm proud that I did that? And
Absolutely.
you picked the the latter, and it worked out tremendously for you.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, our society is in a space, right, through the technology companies that have embedded that into us to have instant gratification. And something Robert talks about in some of his books is how much the naysayers will tell you how poorly of a decision this is to get into rental properties. I had several family members, friends tell me, why are you doing that? That sounds like so much work, such a dumb idea, right? You name it, the list went on. So anyone that's really doing something different than a 9 to 5 job is going to be looked at as kind of, oh, you're kind of being one of those weirdos, right? And from there, you can change your trajectory if you think a little bit differently.
Yeah. It's funny, I've heard this, I won't be able to say it verbatim, but essentially, yeah, you're kind of looked at that weirdo when you go out on that path. But then here you are, I guess we're 10 years later, 12 years later, like, and now you've made it. And I mean, you made it a while back, but then people are like, they look at you as like a fluke, or some people even look at people with money as like the bad guy, right? So like there's never, like, a lot, to your point, to society, there's a lot of people that just are never happy with business owners to a degree, because like they think you're weird for doing it, and then when you hit it, they're just like, they also think you're weird because you have this money, and it's like you're this real estate mogul, you're a landlord, all landlords are bad people, things like that. So you're kind of always in trouble there. But for you and the intentionality you had with your family, you saw that path and you stuck with it. You didn't listen to the naysayers, and like now you have a lot to show for it, which is great.
Yeah, and it's important to have your own vision and your own kind of morals that I always say, marching to the own your own beat of your own drum, right? And understanding that those decisions make up your life. And anybody that is financially insecure as a 65-year-old claiming, oh, I need the government, I need the Social Security, there have been decisions that they've made in the past. Some of them have been made for them too. Don't get me wrong on my words here. There are some pragmatic issues within our country that have forced people's hands to have a life that they don't desire. But there are also some other decisions that they can make to make their life better. And that's up to you to really own those and decide if you want to take that next step in your life.
Yeah, I think it's similar to like compound interest, right? Like the best time to make investment was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. But
Yep.
if you don't make those investments ever, then you're just going to be looking at an empty pile at the end. I want to make a little bit of a transition here, kind of bringing in systems to an extent, but really more about like time savings, right? So for those first 3 years, you didn't have much of a life at all. You've got the corporate job, you're doing the real estate, and then you're able to leave corporate. So I'm assuming that that created some time freedom, but I have written down here, one of your biggest challenges was creating more time for yourself. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about that journey and your goals and where you're at on those goals, or like, where you're at today and what that transformation's been like.
Yeah, so real estate investors all go, and to me, it's kind of a telltale sign of trying to figure out, should I be listening to this person or not? Because if they have more units, never mind, they could be making little money or no money or losing money. We just, in the real estate industry, we value, oh, you've acquired all these units, it must mean you're wealthy, you know what you're doing. So I've been kind of one of these where I don't necessarily worry about that, but in the past, scaling up from 2013 to 2016, I was gas, foot on the pedal, right? All go, no brakes. And 2017, I kind of took a lull and a pause because I was trying to figure out my life and where I was in corporate America and where I'm going to be not in corporate America, because our school systems, our experience all tells us to have a good paying job, work for someone, all those things. And it was a kind of a shock to the system. And then in 2018, I decided, okay, I'm at this Y intersection. I could just kind of be on the path I am now, live a decent life, or do I want to scale up even more? And I chose this path where I scaled up more and decided to hammer down again right as my wife's given birth to our son. 2 weeks prior, we acquired a package of 10 single family houses, like a crazy lunatic. I acquired those and several others a couple months prior. So it really pushed me. And from there, I was just motivated. I think that at the core of myself is I want continuous improvement. And I saw that through asset acquisitions, continuing to buy more and more and more. Right. And then from there, I eventually started kind of taking the foot off the gas, I would say in 2023, primarily because I bought a huge package of single family houses and got burnt out on renovating them. We thought we'd maybe renovate up 4 to 5. In that year, we had 14 of them come up out of the 22 that I acquired. And it was a lot. It was drinking from a fire hose that year. And from there, it really made me think, like, why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? We have financial freedom. We don't need more properties. So I took an oath to myself and I said it out loud, and my wife overheard it. She's held me accountable to it, that I need to be just taking a pause from buying real estate. And so I did for a whole year. And then, like, almost like a drug or alcohol addict, I jumped back on, bought a duplex only because of an investor didn't want to buy it. He kind of got scared of the foundation. I said, this makes a ton of sense. Buy this house or buy this duplex. And he did. And so I was like, I'll just buy it because it makes a ton of sense. So I did, but now I'm back to that pause again. And that, I think, in itself is something that's in between the ears of understanding when is enough. And for some people, it never is. And then some people, they say, okay, I've built a life. Now I need to enjoy it. And that's kind of where I'm at. I still work. Don't get me wrong. I continue to work, but I do it because I want to versus thought that, oh, I need to do this. Now, what I need to do is outsource some of this stuff to other people that can do this work for me versus uh, keeping me in the busy day to day. And that's where I was before. Now, I would say in the last couple of years, I've really kind of approached it more strategically and at the aviation term, 30,000 foot level, right?
Mm.
Being in the sky, overseeing what it is that I need to do to ensure that the business moves forward.
Yeah. And I love that because you're still making progress. It might not be through acquisition of new properties, but you're making progress to me in a better light of now I get more time back. And potentially revenue even increases at the same time, or like, or at least your time per revenue is that gap is like increasing, which is always great. So you're getting more time back, maybe still making the same amount. Maybe you have to pay a couple more people, things like that. But you'll figure that out. So that's a different mind shift. But like you said, you're still working. You're still figuring things out. You're not just sitting back completely. But it's a new goal, and I think that that's where a lot of that happiness and stuff comes from. So let's talk a little bit about the book, Corn Fed Millionaire. So first of all, always love the title, right? And knowing you is like, yeah, this is not the traditional like super shiny. Yeah, you've got a. If you're watching on video, we got that there. Not the super shiny like how to become a millionaire fast or overnight or anything like that. But you definitely had a different approach to how you got this. We've already talked about a lot of it, but would love to learn more about like anything that you haven't covered so far that are like some really good nuggets from the book that would I would definitely urge people to pick it up themselves.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for giving it a shout out. Uh, the title of the book, Corn Fed Millionaire, the synopsis, I don't even know. This is what a rookie author, I don't even know what that's called, the title under it. The Guide to Building Multi-Million Dollar Wealth Through 1 to 4 Unit Real Estate Investing in the Midwest. And why I called it Corn Fed was number one, just to play upon the Iowa stereotype, playing about corn, right? We all eat corn. Well, corn's pretty good here, I guess. And I eat plenty of it. But the idea of us talking about the Midwest as a real estate investment region is not talked about enough. We talk a lot about the East and West Coast and the Southeast. Lately, really, the Southeast has been on fire from a property appreciation standpoint. But now we're seeing it again, especially markets like Austin, Texas, where that was on fire. It was the darling through COVID. And now you're seeing data come out that they're negative 15, 20% in terms of price declines, rents starting to drop and slip a little bit. But here in the Midwest, we're kind of like the tortoise and the hare, but we're not the hare. Austin and all the coastal towns can be the hare. We're the tortoise, and we just kind of slowly trudge along and make good cash flowing properties. I will say it's tougher nowadays for sure, but I really like just the metro I'm in is Cedar Rapids in Iowa, and then just Midwest in general, I think is probably the last pit stop for housing affordability in this country. So I talk a little bit about that in the book. To your question about what another thing in there that isn't necessarily talked about enough, or, we as society, are we really valuing this enough? And I would say critical thought is something that I really strive to be better at and continue to improve on, because I don't think you're ever at a destination when it comes to critical thought. I think it's just getting better and using it over and over and over again before other people start understanding how you're thinking, and then being open to receiving those messages from other people to spur more thought for yourself, right? I am I'm not a red or a blue in the political realm. I am a what makes the most sense kind of person. And from there, really understanding, like the headlines, for instance, if you want to go down the political path, right? Like the headlines, what bias is out there? What are they trying to dissuade you from doing, or really trying to improve their position to have you do? Really understanding that all of this is just kind of a series of events that we all can be a part of or not be a part of. And that's like that in life, business, political affiliation, whatever you want to choose to invest your time in. Those type of things all kind of stack upon one another. And that's, I think, a main reason why I've been successful in real estate. And what I've chose to do was, I think I could have been, again, hopefully I can get my head out of the room as I make this statement. I think I could have been successful in whatever I applied myself to do, mainly because of the mindset I chose to do it with, and being critical and what I was thinking and how I was showing up and doing these things made it to where I had a unfair advantage. So goal is buying those 22 single family houses in March of 2023 is when I bought. Everybody else was saying how hot the market was, right? Everybody was talking about how the real estate market was overpriced, and maybe we could make this work or maybe not. Interest rates, I have a 6.75% interest rate on those houses. Not the best. Rates are a little bit lower than that now, but they did go higher. I just looked at it from a different lens than most people did. And the way I looked at it was, yes, they're cash flowing a little bit. Yes, some of the properties were utilized in terms of they were market rent was a little bit higher than what they were being rented at now. So the business case didn't make as much sense if you just took it verbatim. So I was able to optimize that a little bit. But the way I looked at it was I changed my lens and my approach. And I wouldn't advocate for this for like a new investor, but I was in a position where I could, at this point, look at it from an equity position. And the way I looked at it was buying it today for what the price was to where the market was, and what I could sell an individual house on Z right on the MLS was roughly 800,000 to $1 million. So that's the way I looked at it. And I don't know of a lot of people doing that. Were they, maybe some people were, and they just didn't want to take that risk. I don't know why those portfolios sat on the market the way it did, but that's like an example of just, I guess the old adage is, taking lemons and making lemonade out of them. I think that's probably the best way to live life and to do business. Understanding there are obstacles and constraints that are going to come at you. Figure out how to get through them, number one. But number two, why are they showing up in your life? And what is going to happen when you overcome that, and how much better of a person and business person you'll be.
Yeah, I love that. And I think to your point, that translates well to a lot of other businesses. Real estate is a lot more math, I think, than all business has math to an extent, but I always hear the adage of like, you make your money at purchase. And so for you, it's a long-term purchase. And for others, they're looking for that short-term gain, right? Like they want to see at least $400 or $500 a month. So they have the margin if something goes wrong that they can afford to replace things. But for you, it's like that's covered. You're at the financial free part. So if you maybe only make 200 a month now instead of 500 a month on on individual properties, like so be it. But when it comes time to retirement down the road or whatever that is, like you have that play, and you still have assets that you could, pull from, if that comes there. So I love the way that you look at that. And I think that critical thought is something I always see in you, Matt. like this case, we're talking about kind of more numbers, but you always look at kind of like that long-term version of like, what would happen if I didn't do this, or what would happen if it did work, versus well, if I ran it through the calculator and it doesn't quite make sense today, it's like, well, okay, we'll get a different calculator, right? And I think that's where you have multiple calculators to kind of figure that out. And I think in business, we kind of need to look at things that way of, you know, in the marketing world, it's, hey, I want to invest $1,500 a month in ads, and I hope that it produces $3,000 to $6,000 in revenue. Like that's like a money printing machine, right? Like I would sign up for that every day. But there's other things you invest in your business today that maybe don't make an immediate turnaround on revenue, but
Right.
years down the road, it's going to pay you back. Whether you're investing in a better vehicle, if your company depends on vehicles or things like that. It's like I can either get a cheaper vehicle today and have to repair it every other month, or I cough up an extra 20 grand now and I never have to worry about it again. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And I think people look at the quick path and it doesn't always pay off.
Yeah. And even in my corporate experience, I will say the corporations I worked for, they really valued the immediate return, right? From the stockholders' perspective, they want quarter growth, annual growth. They're not looking at 2-year growth. They're not looking at 5-year growth. I am though,
Mm-hmm.
because if you invest in something, think about it. If it's a 4-year return on your investment, you're basically saying you're getting 25% return on your money. Name a mutual fund stock that's basically guaranteeing you that with a little bit of risk through the real estate market. If you've been in it long enough, you pretty much have your ideas on how things are going to run, barring any major meltdowns like we had in '08 or COVID. There were some disruptions that actually turned out to be beneficial. Who would have guessed? But that was another example, right, of critical thought. Think through how that was going to work. And my immediate thought with COVID was the market's going to tank. And then what I didn't calculate was the government intervention ballooned it right back up. And in fact, we had more real estate demand than we did prior to COVID because we printed so much money and it had to go somewhere.
I think the other part was people getting tired of their family. And I'm sure a lot of people upgraded size. That was the one thing, the first thing I thought of is like a lot of people are going to be spending a lot of time on Zillow. They've got nothing else to do. They're realizing
Yeah.
how small that living room is or how small those bedrooms are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've always, I need to actually invest in real estate. I've always had like a small, like finger on the pulse of it. And I know enough people now that I can get the support from the people. I think the hardest thing for me to wrap my head around back in the day was I'm going to tie up a lot of this money to bring in like $300 a month, or I could go not tie up any money and trade my time and very easily make $300 or $500 a month. But the angle you're looking at it as is like, okay, I'll tie up this money, but it's going to pay dividends forever. And then at the end, you have that equity and things like that. So that's great. So I'm looking here, just trying to make sure I cover everything. One question we always like to ask as we kind of wrap this up is we've kind of touched on it, but still want to ask it out loud. What is your definition of success? Overnight Success Podcast. At what point did you kind of feel that you hit that success metric? I know you've grown from there, but curious what that was for you.
Yeah, I'll answer this in 2 ways. The definition of success in business was becoming financially free. I guess point blank, that was my barometer early on. And then what kept me going was getting to a point where I felt like I was continually improving and seeing growth, I guess would be the best indicator, just seeing year over year growth. And my wife and I have kind of talked about this a little bit where I I don't know why, but we could go through year by year and we could find something that Matt was doing that's different than what he was doing entirely before that year. So like for instance, in 2019, I became a real estate broker. So we called that the year of the broker. In 2021, I bought my first mobile home community. Never been in that space, but it just having a new challenge I think was something that I really wanted to achieve. Now, looking back on that, I am actually thinking success for me, uh, as I approached the 40 milestone. I went over the hill this year actually. So in success for me from life and business is a little different than what it used to be. And I think that's okay. I think a lot of people don't need to beat themselves up over having goals and not necessarily achieving them, or having goals and then achieving them and then changing their goals to align to their values differently. And I think I'm in that mindset where I've changed a little bit from my life's perspective is having growth and continuous improvement in life, and whatever way that shows up, whether that's more real estate growth. I don't think that's going to be the case. I'm actually paying debt off, so that's a little more fun to me and addictive to actually see myself paying off debt. I think that's, an area of growth, whether it's having more time, going the opposite way of a chapter I wrote in the book of short-term sacrifice equals long-term gain. Now it's time to enjoy the long-term gain and invest in myself, whether it's health, spiritually, time management, whatever, and enjoy the life that we've made together, and really be present with one another, and have relationships that are still positive and long term, all the way up until my eventual death.
Love that. Yeah. I mean, it's a different season, and you've learned, you now get to look back and kind of adjust that based off of what you've learned. And you've also been able to build the ability to do that, right? Like I I don't have any ill will against corporate America, but there is definitely different things that are available to you as you build a successful business on your own versus, a great salary at a corporate job. And I think it's great that you've been able to build that. So now, yeah, you do get to focus on time versus a VP that probably still working 50, 60 hours a week. They probably make amazing money. And if that's your path, then like that's great for you. But where you are now, you're looking at time and you now have the ability to do that, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I've had the fortunate or unfortunate, whichever way you want to look at it. Going back to that critical thought perspective again, I've had the opportunity, as I will call it, to see a couple of my grandparents on their deathbed. And that really helped resonate and galvanize my thought process on this, because we even spent the time where my father actually bought a book, and it was really good. It had questions, thought-provoking questions to ask that person on their deathbed. He was dying of cancer, so we had time, and his mind was incredibly sharp still right up until the end. So we were able to talk to him about it. And he had done a lot of different things. He was an inventor. He was worked with his hands. He had done a lot of things. He was the mayor of his town. He had tons of accolades to talk about, but what it came down to was his friendships and his family. And I think that says a lot.
Yeah. And I think that gets lost sometimes in a world where grinding is, what everybody wants to do and things like that. So that's great. Okay, well, thank you, Matt, for joining. Obviously, so Corn Fed Millionaire, we can get it on Amazon. You've got it in paperback, ebook, and audiobook, which is great. So channel that you use to consume information, you can get it on all three. And then I also see here investoredgere.com is another place that they can find you.
Yeah, that's my website for my brokerage firm, Investor Edge Real Estate. I just abbreviated to RE for real estate. And that's where you can kind of reach out to me if you have questions or want some advice. I'm happy to jump on a call or have a phone call.
Awesome. I really appreciate you being here, Matt. I love that you have obviously a real estate background as a career, but there's a lot of things that translate, and we got into the critical thought and things like that. So really appreciate you jumping on here and sharing ideas that could be used in all different industries, and look forward to seeing how Corn Fed Millionaire turns out going forward.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Awesome. We will see you guys later.